Speaking of user activity, we dived a little further into the numbers. Overall, the users have made together about 160,000 statements. So the top 10 different users made about 11% of all statements, top 100 about 21%, top 1000 about 51%, and the top 10% of users, that's 3,600, made about 72% of all statements. Isn't that a very unbalanced distribution? Do users have a problem with strong opinions, as you call it?
I don't know, I'm not sure about the numbers, but from what you just said, they're more balanced than any other service I know. And that distribution is not just normal, it's better than normal. You have that in every service. I mean, usually the rule is 80-20, 20% of the users make 80% of the statements, right? And with things like YouTube or SoundCloud, it's even more. The distribution to consumers, so more people consume than they create.
So you would see Amen also as a consumer platform, so people just go to Amen, have a look and consume the statements, have fun or get information.
That's the case with any service. Like I said, if you looked at the same, I mean, do you have the similar distribution numbers for Twitter?
I don't have.
Yeah,
so
no, that's the thing.
Yeah.
I think the numbers you mentioned are more evenly distributed than in your normal social service.
But I would say also Twitter is not really a consumer platform, so it's more an interaction platform.
No, not true at all. Most people consume stuff on Twitter. Most people read, like, click on links, and so I think I don't have the exact numbers, but I'm pretty sure that most people that log on to Twitter just read it.
Okay.
I mean, it's the same with YouTube or SoundCloud. I mean, most people on YouTube watch video. They don't contribute.
I agree with you on that. Yeah. So let's talk about strong opinions further. From my perspective, I would say I give the grade best to about 1% of all cases, so very seldom. Let's assume that's the same with worst. That would mean that I could use Amen only in 2% of all cases, which actually means that I would never use Amen because a certain routine is missing. Mm-hmm. Wouldn't it be better to make statements a little bit more flexible to be relevant in more situations?
No, I mean we don't want you to use Amen all the time, right? I think Amen is about establishing the notion of opinions on the internet, right? So every big new service, you know, basically is claiming a new social object and trying to dominate that space, right? And so I don't know, Foursquare dominated check-ins, you know, and once that social object becomes clear, there's usually a huge opportunity. And Amen is about opinion. So we want you to use Amen when you have a strong opinion about something. We're not saying use it for everything all the time, because then nobody would use it and people would say, well, I might as well say that on Twitter, right? I mean, I think still your status update, that's Facebook and Twitter. If you want to post a picture, that's on Instagram. If you know, there's a service for everything, for every category of things that you create. If you want to, you know, if you want to upload sound, you do it on SoundCloud. If you want to upload a video, you do it on Vimeo or YouTube. Every time you catch yourself saying something like, "Wow, this is the best burger ever," you know, this is the worst movie I've ever seen, then we want you to think Amen, take out your phone and post something, right? And we are not limiting you. You have to, at some point, you have to have some focus, right? And we're not focusing ourselves topically. You can talk about anything you want, so it's not a vertical, like, you know, it's just about food or just about reviewing restaurants or just about reviewing hotels. You can speak about anything you want, right? But you have to do it in a superlative way. The interesting thing is that the way how people use it, a lot of people aim in more than one thing in a list, right? So you say Royal Tenenbaums is the best Wes Anderson movie, and then you actually see, you know, the list of, you know, all the Wes Anderson movies, and maybe you think like, oh wow, you know, The Life Aquatic is also cool, and you aim in that as well. So the thing is that I think the trick is that the individual statement is very black and white and very binary. But if you put them on top of each other, you're actually getting a much more differentiated picture. And you know, I like to compare it with a mosaic where the individual stone in a mosaic can be just one color. You know, it's just green or blue or red, and the information that's contained in it is binary. It's just one color. But if you zoom out and if you have millions of little stones in a mosaic, then you can do a photorealistic picture. And I think that's kind of what it is. If you're on Amen and you click on something like Obama or or Michael Jackson or you know, Berlin Tegel Airport, you see all the things that people have said about it, and all of a sudden you get a pretty rounded picture of what that actually is.
Okay. So there's not going to be some increase in flexibility about the statements.
Well, no, I think it is very flexible, to be honest. So the problem is you have to find the sweet spot between flexibility and lightweightness. We don't want people to be intimidated, or or we definitely don't want to make it complicated to say something. But we also have to. The whole point about Amen is that you can put the different statements on top of each other, right? So if we gave you too many different ways of saying the same thing, we'd be basically there where Twitter is, where it's very, very hard to infer sentiment into what people have said in hindsight, right? So if you could say, for example, Chris Rock is the best comedian ever, but you could also say Chris Rock is the funniest guy of all times. How are we going to know that you two meant the same thing, right? So I think that's sort of that's the gamble we're taking. Once you get into the structure, though, it's amazing how you can say everything, right? I mean, you can be ironic. You can say stuff like instead of saying this is the worst restaurant, you can say this is the best restaurant for shitty service. So I think once you get known to the structure, you can say anything you want. It's kind of what, in the beginning it was with the status messages on Facebook, where it always had the is in it, right? That made you less flexible, and eventually they took it out, but it helped tremendously to educate people what a status is.
And first people complained about the is always, and afterwards they complained about that the
Sure.
is isn't anymore there.
Sure. Yeah. No. But that's the thing. I think once you get used to that rigid structure, because I mean, creativity is usually triggered by restriction, right? If you just give someone a blank piece of paper, it is very hard for people to come up with something funny and creative. If you give them 140 characters, it's already a little easier. And if you give them a repost button, then it's easier yet. So I mean, what we see on the internet is that the amount of sort of creativity from scratch is being lowered and lowered. So every new generation of services allows for a less costly engagement with the service, right? I mean, social web really started with blogging, and there you really had to sit down and think hard about a good post that you're writing and so on. Then social networks already made it a little easier because you had different categories. You could describe yourself not just by the stuff you're writing. You could describe yourself by saying my favorite books, my favorite music, which was much easier. So and now you have, instead of the old school blogging, you have Tumblr, where you can just repost stuff and basically fill your own profile with things other people have said. And I think Amen, in a way, actually makes posting easier. Because of the data that we have, we can already give you good suggestions, right? So if you want to talk about restaurant, and a lot of people have said this is the best place for steak in New York, for example, then the moment you pull in that restaurant through the location suggestions that we have based on your location, we already give you a sentence: this and that restaurant is the best place for steak, because most people have said it that way. So if you're lazy, Amen is actually much easier than writing a tweet, right? We basically already give you suggestions of, what your opinion could be based on what other people have said about it. And I think the thing that we're that we see working the best and we're really proud of is this 3-tier way of engaging, right? I mean, you have an amen, which is just a press of a button, but it's more than a like, because you actually vote on something. You know, if I amen you, your statement goes up. So if you said Life Aquatic is the best Wes Anderson movie and I amen you, that just moved up 1 vote in the list. Then you have the hell no, which is, you don't have to think about a completely new statement from scratch. You just basically have to answer with 1 word. And that's usually also very easy, because you go through the feed and you're like, that's not the best Wes Anderson movie. Royal Tenenbaums is, right? But but even then you helped us build something. You know, if you just comment, if you just write a comment, it doesn't help building something. But in our case, because of the structured nature of the service and the list, every interaction with the service, and even if it's just an amen, helps creating utility, right? And helps driving, you know, the useful aspects of the service. And then the third and most engaging way of interacting with the service is writing a new post. But you can add value to the overall system by not even writing something new and original, but just answering to other people, basically.
Okay.